I've lived long enough to know not all blows come from strangers. Sometimes it's the woman you welcomed into your family. When my daughter-in-law shattered my heirloom dishes, screaming, "Your stuff ruins my house," I just knelt and collected the pieces. She thought I was broken. She didn't know every shard was a milestone in a plan I started weeks ago. By the time she realized, the house she called mine already belonged to someone else. My name is Eleanor Graves, and I am 62 years old. In the sterile, echoing white of my son's kitchen, I was unwrapping the past. The countertops, cold white marble, seemed to reject the warmth of the porcelain I was carefully unstacking. My mother's china. Each plate was bordered in delicate, hand-painted blue forget-me-nots. They were the only things I'd brought with me, the last vestige of my old life. The click of heels on the engineered floor was my only warning. Madison, my daughter-in-law, appeared in the doorway. She is a lifestyle influencer, a woman who makes a living by having the right shade of beige sofa. She stopped. Her eyes, which were always scanning for imperfections, landed on my mother's plates. Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows drew into a sharp line of offense. "What are those?" Her voice was flat, devoid of curiosity, full of judgment. "They absolutely do not go with the aesthetic of this house." I tried to keep my voice even. I had learned that any emotion was a weakness here. "They were my mother's. Madison. They are the only things I kept when I sold the house after Richard died. They mean a great deal to me." She sighed, a theatrical display of impatience. "Eleanor, I've explained this. This is my house. My followers expect a certain look. This floral clutter, it just doesn't work." "It's just a few plates," I began, but I never finished. She moved with a speed that was shocking. Before I could react, she seized the entire stack of china, the dinner plates, the saucers, the history, and ripped them from my hands. I gasped, stumbling back. She turned and hurled them, all of them, straight into the deep, stainless steel sink. The sound was obscene, a violent, shattering explosion that echoed off the hard, minimalist surfaces. It wasn't just a breaking, it was a detonation. Shards of porcelain flew like shrapnel, skittering across the marble, raining down onto the floor. She wasn't done. She rounded on me, her face pale with a rage that seemed entirely out of proportion. "Your stuff ruins my house," she screamed, her voice climbing into a shrill register. It was so loud, I saw our neighbour, Mrs. Petroff, pause her gardening and look toward our window. "Either it goes, or you do." Silence descended, heavy and sharp as the broken edges at my feet. My hands were shaking. I felt the hot flush of humiliation, the metallic taste of pure violation. She stood there, breathing hard, waiting for me to shatter just like the plates. But she didn't know me. Beneath the trembling, my gaze was calm. It was almost unnervingly still. I had been waiting for this. I had been counting on this exact moment, this precise, calculated loss of control. I looked down at the wreckage. A blue flower on a white triangle of porcelain stared up at me. A small, dry sound escaped my throat. It was almost a laugh. Madison flinched, her rage faltering into confusion. "I'll clean this up," I whispered, putting on the mask of the defeated old woman. "I'm sorry for the mess." I walked steadily to the sink, pulled out the heavy rubber gloves, and knelt, my arthritic knees complaining. I began picking up the largest, sharpest pieces. As I did, My gloved fingers closed around one specific, jagged piece, and I quietly palmed it. Madison watched me for another moment, her upper lip curled in disgust. Then, satisfied, she spun on her heel and stormed out. I waited until I heard her office door slam shut upstairs. I rose slowly. I went to the one kitchen drawer she never opened, my sewing kit drawer. Beneath the spools of thread, I pulled out a cheap, old burner phone. I tapped the screen. There it was. The entire scene, captured in perfect, clear video. The tiny, pinhole camera I had installed under the kitchen cabinet weeks ago had caught everything. Her voice, her words, the violence, the throw. This, I thought, as I saved the file. This was the final piece. You want to know why I let her do it? Why I would let myself be humiliated? Why I would sacrifice my mother's memory for a video clip to understand that? We have to go back to the day I first set foot in this house, believing I was coming home. It all started a few months ago, just after the fog of grief had begun to clear, only to be replaced by the harsh glare of reality. My husband, Richard, was gone. His heart, the one I had leaned on for 40 years, had simply given out. I was left alone in our little house in Harborfield, the one we'd bought when Daniel was just a boy. But the house was too big. The silence was suffocating. And the money, I discovered, was mostly gone. Richard's long illness had quietly, relentlessly eaten through every dollar we had saved. Then came my own betrayal, from my body. My doctor, a kind man, looked grimly at the x-rays of my hands and hips. Severe arthritis. Eleanor, he said gently, you shouldn't be living alone right now. My son, Daniel, my only child, called it a solution. He's 35, a man who believes every problem has a neat, logical answer. Mom, just sell the house, he said, his voice brisk and practical over the phone. The market's good. You can come live with us, with me and Madison. It's the perfect answer. Us was in Northridge Estates, a wealthy, manicured suburb about a 40-minute drive and a different universe from the city. So I did it. I sold the house I had painted, gardened, and lived in, the house I thought I would die in. I packed my life into a few cardboard boxes. The new house was nothing like mine. If my home was a warm, cluttered collection of memories, Madison's was an advertisement. It was a sterile, echoing landscape of white, beige, and a pale, dead grey. Everything, she informed me, was curated for her online brand, her community. The furniture was all sharp angles and pale, unforgiving fabrics, trendy pieces that looked as if they'd snap under the weight of a real conversation. Nothing in that house had existed for more than a year. I felt like a smudge of old paint in a pristine, empty gallery. Madison, in those first few days, was a whirlwind of practiced warmth. At least, she was, when the little red light on her camera was on. She would loop her arm through mine. Oh, Mom, we are just so thrilled to have you here, she would coo to her phone. It's so important to cherish family. But the moment the screen went dark, the arm dropped. The smile vanished. Eleanor, she would say, her voice suddenly clipped and cold. I'd appreciate it if you didn't leave your teacup on that table. It's not a coaster. And it ruins the shot. Or, I'm filming a new home tour in the living room tomorrow, so perhaps you could stay in your room until after lunch, so we don't disrupt the flow. Daniel. My Daniel. was either blind or chose to be. He vanished into his home office before sunrise, plugged into his job at a vague financial firm called Silverbridge Capital, and emerged only for dinner, his eyes still glued to his phone. "Just give it time, Mum," he'd murmur when I tried to gently voice my dislocation. "Madison is just stressed from her online work. It's a lot of pressure, you know. Just try to fit in. Okay, fit in." As if I were a new cushion she hadn't approved. I had managed to salvage only a few boxes. Old books, the photo albums, a few lace doilies my mother had crocheted, and, of course, my mother's china. When the boxes arrived, Madison inspected them like a border guard looking for contraband. She held up one of the delicate lace doilies between her thumb and forefinger, as if it were contaminated. "What is this?" she asked. Not of me, but of the air. She didn't wait for an answer. "We'll just put all this in the garage for now," she declared, taping the box shut. "We can't have them ruining the whole mood of the house." My world was reduced to the small guest room upstairs. I was allowed one small corner of a kitchen cabinet for my kettle and my Earl Grey tea. Every other aspect of my existence required Madison's approval. I wasn't her husband's mother. I was a long-term, non-paying, inconvenient tenant. The real campaign began at the dinner table, always disguised as loving concern, always in front of Daniel. "Eleanor, you left the stove on again today," she'd say one night, a look of worry aimed at her husband. I knew I hadn't. I hadn't even cooked. "Mum, you have to be more careful," Daniel would scold, his brow furrowed. Another night, "Did you get lost in the backyard? Mum, I saw you just standing by the fence for almost an hour." I had been looking at a cardinal in the oak tree. "Maybe we should check her medication," she'd whisper to Daniel, just loud enough for me to hear. I saw it. I felt the chill. But I said nothing. I was a guest. I was a burden. I swallowed the small indignities, the cold corrections, the creeping fear. I told myself I just needed to endure it for a little while, just until I could figure out another way. I didn't know that my quiet endurance wasn't patience. To Madison, it was weakness. It was an invitation. I had just made myself the perfect target. The subtle suggestions soon hardened into house rules. Madison was building her brand, and I was a blemish. "Eleanor, we just can't have these old photos up," she said one afternoon, plucking a framed picture of Richard and a young Daniel off the hallway table. "It just doesn't fit the minimalist vibe. My life was tucked away, one box at a time, into the back of a closet. No patterned tablecloths, no books with colourful spines in the living room. My small corner of the kitchen was the only territory I held, and even that felt temporary. Then came the chipping away at my mind. It was quiet, insidious. "Did you take your pills yet, Eleanor?" she would ask, even when I was holding the water glass in my hand. "Are you sure you seem a little forgetful today?" I would tell a story about Daniel's childhood, and she would interrupt, her smile tight. "You already told me that story, Mom. Remember just last week?" I hadn't. I was sure I hadn't, but she said it with such confidence, and Daniel would look at me with that flicker of concern, and for a moment, I would falter. I would second-guess myself. Was I forgetting? Was my mind, like my body, beginning to fail me one evening? I overheard her talking to Daniel in a low, concerned whisper. "I'm worried about her sleep. Dan, she seems so restless. I don't think her prescription is working. Daniel, my son, who trusted his wife implicitly, became her unwitting accomplice. A few days later, he came home with a new, unlabeled amber bottle. Madison spoke to a specialist online. "Mom," he explained, avoiding my eyes. "These are supposed to be much better. Help you get a really deep sleep. Madison will manage the dose for you, just to be safe." So I took them. Each night, Madison would bring me a small white pill with my water. Within a week, the world went fuzzy. It wasn't a deep sleep. It was a fog. I was perpetually drowsy, moving through a thick haze. I would sit down to read and wake up 3 hours later, the book on the floor. No memory of closing my eyes. Time smeared. Mornings and afternoons blurred into one long, confusing twilight. And the accidents started. "Mom," Daniel would shout, rushing into the kitchen. "You left the gas on again." I would stumble in, confused. The knob was twisted. I didn't remember touching the stove. Madison would be there, shaking her head, phone in hand. "I just turned it off," she'd say, her voice trembling for Daniel's benefit. I smelled it from upstairs. Thank God I was here. She was always taking pictures. Pictures of a pot I'd supposedly let boil over. Pictures of a glass of water spilled on the hardwood floor, which she claimed I'd left there. "Just for our records," she'd murmur. "To show the doctor." That's when Daniel first used the phrase, long-term solution. He sat with me on the edge of my bed, his face etched with worry. "Mom, we're worried you're not safe here." Madison happened to find this really wonderful assisted living place. It's beautiful. And you'd have friends your own age, people to talk to. It was a physical pain, sharp and deep, right under my ribs. He was casting me out, gently, for my own good. I kept my face placid. I couldn't let him see the terror. The fog was thick, but that night, a jolt of adrenaline cut through it. I woke up, parched, my mouth full of cotton. I crept downstairs for water. The house was dark, but a blue light glowed from the living room. Madison was on her phone, whispering to a friend on FaceTime. "I'm telling you, Tiff," she hissed. "It's almost done. He's finally seeing how bad she is. And if the old woman goes to the facility, the house will be quiet. And more importantly, we'll finally have the equity to borrow more. That kitchen remodel isn't going to pay for itself." Equity. Borrow more. The words sliced through my medicated haze. The next day, she came to me while I was in my drowsy, post-pill state. She had a small stack of papers and a pen. "Eleanor, just a few forms for the insurance," she said, her voice bright and fast. "It's to help reduce the cost of your new prescriptions. Just sign at the bottom." I tried to focus. The words on the page swam. Power of financial. I can't read this. Madison. I mumbled. "It's blurry." "It's just standard boilerplate. Mum, here, I'll help you." She guided my hand to the line. "Just sign right here." A cold, sharp feeling of danger spiked through me, but my hand, disconnected from my brain, moved and signed. From that day, I started to fight the fog. I began hiding the mail that came for me, tucking envelopes from my bank under the mattress of my small bed. I noticed strange letters, paperwork about accounts I didn't recognize, talk of mortgages, and on one of them, a loan application. I saw my name, printed in stark black letters, right next to Daniel's, and Madison's. That night, when Madison brought me the little white pill and the glass of water, I palmed it. I pretended to drink, pretended to swallow, and held the acrid-tasting thing in my fist until she left. I flushed it down the toilet. I lay awake all night, my heart pounding a heavy, terrified rhythm. But when the sun came up, the fog was gone. I was awake. I was terrified. And I was clearer-headed than I had been in months. I had been off Madison's nightly pills for 3 full days. The fog had thinned, replaced by a cold, vibrating clarity. My mind felt like a locked room I had finally found the key for. It was on the 4th morning, while Madison was loudly directing a delivery man dropping off a new beige rug, that my personal cell phone, the old one I kept in my purse, the one Madison assumed I barely knew how to use, vibrated with an unknown number. "Is this Eleanor Graves?" a voice asked. It was female, crisp and serious. "Yes, this is she. My name is Olivia Marsh. I'm a compliance officer with Harborfield Community Bank." My stomach tightened. Harborfield was my old bank, the one that held the modest savings account Richard and I had built, the last piece of my financial independence. "I'm calling because we've flagged some unusual activity on an account bearing your name," she continued. "It is extremely important that I speak with you in person, Mrs. Graves. And I must emphasize, you need to come alone. Please do not bring your son or your daughter-in-law." The urgency in her voice cut through any remaining haze. This was it. "Madison!" I called out, forcing a quaver into my voice as I entered the living room. "I'm feeling very dizzy. I think I need to go to the doctor, just the local clinic." She barely looked up from her phone, annoyed. "Fine, Eleanor. Just don't expect me to take you. I have content to shoot." No, dear," I said, playing the part. I'll take the bus." The bus. It was a lie, but she bought it. I walked, my arthritis screaming in protest, nearly half a mile to a different bus stop, the one that went downtown. The journey felt like an escape. Every jolt of the bus, every stop. I felt a knot of fear and, for the first time in months, a wild, sharp pulse of adrenaline. I was doing something forbidden. Olivia Marsh led me into a small, glass-walled meeting room at the main branch. She was young, all business, with eyes that looked like they missed nothing. She slid a thick folder across the table. "This," she said, tapping the cover, "is an application for a substantial line of credit, submitted last week." She opened it. The words blurred. They were applying for a mortgage. The collateral listed my old house in Harborfield, the one I had already sold, and, as secondary collateral, the entire balance of my savings account. "But I sold that house," I whispered, the room suddenly cold. "We know," Olivia said. "That's one reason it was flagged. The other is this." She turned the page. It was a power of attorney, a full, comprehensive document giving Daniel and Madison Cole Graves complete and total authority over all my financial and medical decisions. And at the bottom, a shaky, familiar signature. Mine. "Did you sign this, Mrs. Graves?" Olivia asked, her voice flat. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. "No," I said. "I have never seen this document. I would never sign this." "That's what we thought." She pulled another paper from the stack. "This was submitted with the application. It's a medical assessment." I read it. It was a 2-page report, allegedly from a neurologist named Dr. Alan Finch. It described my rapidly progressing cognitive decline, my bouts of confusion, and memory loss. It strongly recommended that I be placed under a full financial guardianship for my own safety. "We ran the name," Olivia said quietly. "There is no Dr. Alan Finch licensed to practice in this state. This entire report is a fabrication." And then I saw it. The signature. The forged, shaky signature on the power of attorney. I knew exactly where she got the template. A memory surfaced, cold and sharp. Christmas. Madison holding an old greeting card I'd written. "Oh, Eleanor, your handwriting is so elegant, I just love it. Can I keep this, just as a little keepsake?" She hadn't been admiring it. She'd been practicing. I looked at Olivia, my voice barely a whisper. "She's trying to have me declared incompetent." "She's trying to steal your money," Olivia countered, her voice softening for the first time. "Mrs. Graves, I see elder fraud cases. Usually it's a phone scam, a con artist. It's not often the family. When it is, they're more ruthless." She paused, making a decision. "Look, officially, I have to escalate this to our fraud department and the police. But I'm choosing to talk to you first. I'm taking a risk here. My grandmother was in a similar situation." She slid a business card across the table. It was plain white cardstock. "Redwood Elder Law," it read. "Jonas Calder, attorney at law." "Go see him," Olivia said. "Now. Today. He specializes in this. He's a bulldog. And Mrs. Graves." I looked up, clutching the card. "When you go home, you know nothing. You are the dizzy, confused, harmless old woman she's told everyone you are. You don't know me. This meeting never happened. Let her think her plan is working. Let her get bolder. People like her. They always get sloppy when they think they've already won." On the bus ride home, sitting on the rattling vinyl seat, I clutched the cheap business card from Redwood Elder Law. The world outside the window was a grey smear, but my mind was perfectly, terribly clear. I was no longer the dizzy, grieving widow. I was a target, but a target that was starting to shoot back. My mother's voice, gone for 20 years, surfaced in my memory, as sharp as the day she'd said it. "Age doesn't make you powerless, Eleanor. It just teaches you when to strike." The time for politeness, for enduring, for hoping my son would see, was over. I was done begging for kindness. I would protect myself. The next day, I told Madison I had a follow-up appointment for my arthritis. I took 2 buses to get to Jonas Calder's office. It was nothing like the sleek, minimalist world Madison inhabited. It was a dusty, second-floor office above a bakery, and it smelled of old paper and cinnamon. Jonas himself was a man in his 50s, shirt untucked, hair looking like he'd been pulling at it, but his eyes were the sharpest I had ever seen. He listened to my entire story, from the first, "Mum, you seem forgetful," to the forged medical report, without saying a word. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "She's building a case, Mrs. Graves, a meticulous, fraudulent case for guardianship." He explained the law, the way she could use that fabricated report, paired with her notes, to petition a court, how she could seize control of my finances, my medical care, and my person, all under the guise of loving concern. "So, here's what we do," he said, leaning forward. "First, you stop taking those pills. I don't care how. Palm them, flush them. but not one more. Second, I am scheduling you with a neurologist I trust in the next county. We need a full, independent cognitive baseline. That report will be our shield. It makes her a liar, not just a concerned daughter-in-law. From his office, I went to a convenience store. I bought a cheap prepaid phone and $100 calling card. I paid in cash. Back in Madison's sterile house, I hid the phone in the one place she would never look, the one place that represented everything she hated, the bottom of my antique sewing box, buried under spools of thread and lace. That phone was my only lifeline to Jonas and Olivia. My first call was to Olivia at the bank. "Mr. Calder says to proceed," I said, my voice low. "It's done," she replied. "All business. I've placed an administrative freeze on all transactions based on that power of attorney. I've flagged it as a pending compliance review. They won't get a hard denial, just delays. It will make them impatient, not suspicious." My next task was harder. Jonas had been insistent. "You must become the victim she believes you are," he'd said. "And you must get evidence." I bought a small digital voice recorder, another cash purchase. I kept it in the pocket of my housecoat. Every time Madison brought me my pills, her voice full of false sympathy, I pressed record. Every time she mentioned the facility or sighed to Daniel about my forgetfulness, I pressed record. My small, unwelcome room became an evidence vault. A few nights later, I feigned sleep on the living room sofa, a book open on my chest. I heard them whispering in the kitchen, convinced I was sedated. "The credit cards are nearly maxed." "Dan," Madison hissed. "This new furniture brand wants to collaborate, but they need to shoot the whole house. We can't do that until we renovate, and we can't renovate until we clear out. All this." "Mads, I don't know," Daniel stammered. "The bank is... They're dragging their feet on the new equity line." "I know," she snapped. "Just get them to hurry. As soon as we have access, and she's... settled. We'll be fine." I lay still, my breathing slow and even, but my heart was a cold stone. I heard Daniel's voice. He wasn't the monster. He was the fool. He was weak, drowning in debt, and desperate to believe his wife's version of success. He was being manipulated by financial pressure, convinced he was doing the right thing. My fight wasn't with him. He was a lost cause, but he was still my son. The spear, I decided, had to be aimed only at her. To save him, I had to destroy her. Later that night, in my room, I plugged in the tiny earphones and listened back to the day's recordings. I heard her voice, the one she used for her vlogs, suddenly turned sharp and cold. "Just take the pill, Eleanor. Don't you want to feel better?" And then, when she thought I was out of earshot, talking to Daniel, "The senile old woman is just slowing us down." I turned off the recorder and sat in the darkness, the contempt in her voice still ringing in my ears. "All right, Madison," I whispered to the empty, beige room. "Let's see what this senile old woman can do." I took another doctor's trip, this one orchestrated by Jonas. I told Madison my arthritis was acting up and I needed to see a specialist in the next town over. This town was 40 miles away, and the neurologist I met had never heard of Madison Cole. For 3 hours, I sat in a quiet, sterile room. I answered questions. I repeated lists of 5, then 10 words. I drew a clock. I explained the meaning of proverbs. It was mentally exhausting, but I was clear, focused, and fueled by a cold rage. The doctor, a no-nonsense woman, looked over her glasses at the end. "Mrs. Graves," she said, "your results are not just normal. They are above average for your age group. You have a sharper memory than most of my staff." Jonas didn't wait. The second that certified, ironclad report was sent to his office, he filed it with the local courthouse. He didn't just keep it for defense. He went on offense. He opened a preventative file in my name, a formal declaration that I was of sound mind, and attached a petition noting that I feared an impending, fraudulent attempt at a guardianship hearing by family members, citing potential financial abuse. It was a legal tripwire, planted right where Madison was planning to walk. Next, the money. Olivia Marsh called my burner phone. "The big prize thereafter, your savings account," she said, her voice low. "Let's take it off the table." She walked me through an online process, so simple I could have cried. In less than 5 minutes, I transferred my entire life savings from the Harborfield Community Bank to a new account at a tiny, obscure credit union in another state, under my name only. The bone Madison was trying to steal, the collateral for her faked loans, was gone. She was now digging an empty grave. With my defenses secured, it was time to build my case. I needed to understand the enemy's movements. I found my opening with Carla, the neighbor who had seen Madison's outburst over the plates. I, coincidentally, ran into her at the mailbox, playing the part of the slightly frail, lonely widow. Carla, it turned out, was a neighborhood watch captain in spirit. She confirmed what I suspected. Madison had a rigid schedule. "Oh, her," Carla said, rolling her eyes. "She goes live every Tuesday at 10 in the morning, like clockwork, and she always leaves the back door unlocked for her little team." The following Tuesday, I found Carla in her garden. "Carla," I whispered, putting a tremor in my hand. "I'm so frightened. There was such a terrible argument last night. I heard shouting." Carla's eyes narrowed. At 5 minutes past 10, as Madison's live stream began, Carla marched up the walkway and rang the bell. I watched from my upstairs window, my cheap phone recording. Madison opened the door, her face a mask of live in front of an audience sweetness. "Carla, we're rolling," she chirped. "Oh, heavens, dear," Carla said, her voice projecting beautifully. "I was just so worried. I heard the most awful fight last night. Such screaming. I told my husband, that just doesn't sound right. I had to make sure you were both okay." Madison's smile froze, then cracked. There was no fight," she stammered, her eyes darting to the camera inside. "You must be mistaken." "Oh, really?" Carla pressed. "It sounded like things were breaking." Madison, seeing her perfect stream dissolving, slammed the door. I had it. Another piece of evidence. Jonas took my new video, my voice recordings, and Carla's informal testimony, and made the next call. He contacted Riverside Adult Protective Services. He didn't file a formal report. Not yet. He simply opened a confidential file on my behalf, establishing me as a potential victim and providing them with my lawyer's contact information. In case of emergency, we were building a wall of bureaucracy around her. Now, the final plan took shape. "She's getting desperate, Eleanor," Jonas told me on the burner phone. "The bank is stalling, and she's in debt. She's going to push the incompetent angle, and fast. We need her to bring all her faked evidence, all her lies, into one single room. The plan let Madison set up a meeting with a lawyer she chose to finalize the guardianship. A lawyer Jonas knew, a man who owed him a favor and who hated being party to fraud. My role was simple. I had to become the woman she believed I was. I began forgetting small, calculated things. I'd ask Daniel if it was morning or afternoon. I'd stare blankly at the remote. When Madison mentioned the assisted living facility again, I didn't resist. I looked down, my hands trembling. Maybe, I whispered, ensuring she could hear me. If I'm such a burden, maybe it's for the best. I saw the flash of triumph in her eyes. She thought she had won. I met Jonas one last time in the dusty hallway above the bakery. He looked grim. "You are sure you want to go through with this?" "Eleanor, this isn't just about protecting your money anymore. When we spring this trap, it will destroy her entire public-facing life. Her brand, her reputation, possibly her marriage." I thought about the sound of my mother's china shattering in the steel sink. "Mr. Calder," I said, my voice perfectly steady. That's the whole point. She was glowing when she announced it. The picture of a dutiful, organized daughter-in-law. "I have wonderful news," Madison said at the dinner table, placing her manicured hand over Daniel's. "I managed to get us an appointment with a fantastic family lawyer tomorrow afternoon, Brent Lawson. He's the best. Just to consult, you know, about the best way to handle Mum's future and make sure her care is all properly set up." Daniel visibly relaxed. My son, my practical, conflict-avoidant son, nodded, relieved that someone else was handling the problem. "That's great. Mads. Really great." He thought this was about wills and healthcare directives. I knew what it really was. It was the trap Jonas had baited, and Madison was walking right into it. But first, she had one last performance. She was desperate for content, and the meeting with the lawyer was one day away. That night, she staged a 3 generations at the table dinner. It was, of course, for her brand. She even brought in a new, ridiculously expensive minimalist high chair for her daughter, Lily, who I rarely got to see. "Eleanor," she called out, her phone already propped on the counter, its red light on. "We're using the new white plates tonight. They fit the concept so much better." She gestured to a stack of heavy, soulless white dishes from a big box store. I had been waiting for this. I looked at the cheap plates, then at her. "No, dear," I said, my voice quiet, but, for the first time, not submissive. "If this dinner is truly about generations, then I will use my mother's." I ignored the sharp, angry hiss of air she sucked through her teeth. I walked to the cabinet, the one she hated, and carefully took out the stack of blue and white porcelain. Her eyes were daggers, but the camera was on. She couldn't stop me without breaking character. I set the table. I even placed one plate near Lily's high chair, just out of her reach. "This sweet girl," I said, my voice clear and steady, "belonged to your great-great-grandmother. She brought this from the old country, one plate at a time." The second Madison hit the stop button on her phone, the mask vaporized. "What in the hell do you think you were doing?" she hissed, her voice shaking with rage. "Madison, calm down. It was fine." Daniel started, already looking uncomfortable. "It was not fine. Daniel, stay out of this," she snapped. I had a concept. I had a brand deal pending. My followers do not want to see that. That clutter. That old, dated, provincial junk. She stormed toward the table. You actively, deliberately ruined my content. They are just plates, Madison, I said, rising. They are not just plates. They are a symbol of everything I am trying to get rid of. She shrieked. She grabbed the edge of the linen tablecloth a prop, like everything else in the house, and yanked it. The whole setting lurched. Plates clattered. Glasses tipped. No, I cried out. My hands, slow with arthritis, trying to grab the stack, trying to save them. She ripped the stack of my mother's history right out of my grasp. In her rage, she was strong. She held them aloft for 1 second, her face a mask of pure, ugly fury. Then, she turned and hurled them with all her strength into the stainless steel sink and onto the marble floor. The sound was obscene, a violent, shattering explosion that echoed off every hard, minimalist surface. It was like a gunshot, but of glass and memory. Shards of blue and white flew like shrapnel, skittering across the floor, catching the light from the expensive fixtures, glittering like cruel stars. Madison, Daniel yelled, jumping to his feet, his voice finally, truly sharp. She rounded on him, her chest heaving, tears of pure anger in her eyes. Don't you get it? Dan, we are drowning in her stuff. We are drowning. This is my house. There it was, the sentence that defined everything. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just looked at the wreckage. Then, very calmly, I walked to the sink, pulled out the heavy rubber gloves, and knelt to begin picking up the pieces. From the floor, I looked up at her. Good, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. You just proved it. Madison froze, her rage faltering. Proved? Proved what? That you don't care about anything but the surface. I nodded my head, just slightly toward the kitchen counter, where her small, secondary vlogging camera sat. A tiny red light was blinking. And you proved it, right on camera. Her face went from red to a pasty, sick white. You? She lunged for the camera, her hands fumbling. She ripped the cord from the wall. You witch. You planned this. It was too late. But it also didn't matter. That camera was just the decoy. The real camera, the one I had installed weeks ago, was still nestled unseen under the cabinet. As I knelt, my hands hidden by the gloves, I reached under the cabinet lip. My fingers found the tiny micro SD card. I pressed it. It clicked. I palmed it. A tiny piece of black plastic containing my entire case, and slipped it deep into the pocket of my housecoat. I stood up, my knees cracking. I'm very tired, I said, my voice suddenly frail again. I need to go to my room and rest. Hours later, there was a soft knock. Daniel? He opened the door, his face grey. Mom, he whispered. I am so sorry about what happened, about the plates. I just sat on my bed and looked at him. I saw the apology, but I also saw the dawning, sickening realization of who he had married. And then, beneath that, I saw the panic, the fear of debt, the fear of losing his wife, the fear of his perfect life collapsing. He was trapped. He was paralyzed by his own weakness. And I knew, as I watched him struggle, that I was utterly, completely on my own. The morning after the destruction of my china, the house was silent and tense. Madison was brittle, her face a mask of makeup and barely concealed impatience. She had thrown away the evidence, but the atmosphere was thick with the dust. The appointment is at 11, she announced, her voice clipped. Not looking at me, Daniel is coming. We're all going. She drove us. I sat in the back of the white SUV, a prisoner on her way to an arraignment. Daniel sat in the passenger seat, staring at his phone, his jaw tight. He hadn't spoken to Madison since the night before. Brent Lawson's office was on the 12th floor of a gleaming glass tower downtown. The lobby was all marble and leather, smelling of money and corporate ruthlessness. This was not a cozy family law office. It was a place where assets were divided and deals were cut. Madison, I realized, specialized in real estate and guardianship. What she didn't know was that Jonas had already made his move. While she had been meticulously applying her no makeup, Jonas had been on the phone with Brent Lawson. He had been polite but firm. "Mr. Lawson, I'm calling to inform you I represent Eleanor Graves. I understand your clients, Mr. and Mrs. Graves, are meeting you today. Any discussion regarding guardianship or Mrs. Graves's capacity must, of course, include me. I'm sure you, as a man of professional integrity, would want to avoid any appearance of complicity in elder fraud." He'd also mentioned the criminal penalties. He'd set the mine. We were led into a conference room with a view of the entire city. Madison took charge, all confidence and fake concern. "Brent, thank you so much for seeing us," she gushed, pulling a thick binder from her designer tote bag. She opened it. "As I explained on the phone, we are just so worried about Mom." She laid it all out, her evidence, a neat typed log of my forgetfulness, the photos she had taken the pot on the stove, the spilled water, a medication diary that meticulously documented every pill she had claimed to give me. And finally, the centerpiece, a freshly typed, pristine document. Durable power of attorney. All it needed was my signature and his notary stamp. "We just want to make sure Daniel can, help her with her finances. Things are getting so confusing for her." Brent Lawson, a man with a $5,000 suit and a hunted look in his eyes, did not look at Madison. He looked at me. He understood he was sitting on a bomb. He cleared his throat and pretended to leaf through the file. "Mrs. Graves," he said, his voice a smooth, professional baritone. "Just a few formalities. Can you tell me today's date?" "It's November 18th, 2025, I said. "It's a Tuesday." Madison's smile tightened. "And the current president?" "That would be Mr. Harris," I said, though I can't say I'm thrilled about it. A small smile flickered on Brent's lips. "And your current address?" I recited the address of Madison's house perfectly. "Though I'm not sure," I added, my voice quavering just slightly, "how much longer I'll be welcome there." "That's not," Madison began, her voice sharp, lurching forward to cut me off. The door to the conference room opened. Jonas Calder walked in, his shirt untucked, his hair a mess, and his eyes like lasers. He looked like he belonged in a different, grittier world than this glass office, and he instantly commanded the room. "Apologies for my lateness," he said, not sounding apologetic at all. "I'm Jonas Calder. I'm Mrs. Graves's attorney." He dropped a file on the polished table. It made a solid, heavy thud. "First," he said, sliding a document across the table to Brent. "This is the certified report from Dr. Aris, a board-certified neurologist, dated last week. It confirms my client, Mrs. Graves, has a cognitive function well above average for her age." He slid a second document over. And this is a courtesy copy of the preventative petition we filed with the county court, citing my client's concerns about fraudulent attempts to secure guardianship. The air in the room went from tense to ice cold. Daniel's head snapped up. Madison's face, for one glorious second, was completely blank with shock. She recovered, forcing a high, brittle laugh. "A lawyer, Mum? What is this? This is just a friendly family chat. You didn't need to." Brent Lawson held up a hand, his face a mask of professional neutrality. He was now on safe ground. "In light of this, I'm afraid I cannot proceed with any of this. Mrs. Graves Cole, not without Mrs. Graves's explicit, independent consent." He pushed Madison's binder back across the table. Jonas pulled a small digital recorder from his pocket and placed it in the center of the table. "For the sake of transparency," he said, his voice mild, "I'm going to record this conversation. I'm sure no one objects." Madison's eyes darted to the recorder, then to Daniel. She was about to object, but Daniel, my son who believed in rules and process, gave a stiff nod. "Fine," Daniel said. "Transparency is good." Jonas had her. "Excellent." He pressed the red button. "Now, Mrs. Graves Cole," he said, using her full last name. "I'm fascinated by this file you've compiled." He pointed to her binder. "Who, exactly, wrote these daily notes about my client's confusion?" I did," Madison said, her voice small. "And who took these photographs of her accidents?" "I took them, just to keep track." "And who," Jonas said, his voice dropping, "was in sole possession and control of my client's medication? The medication she was given nightly." "I was," Madison said, her defensiveness rising. "I was just helping her manage it." "Interesting," Jonas said, leaning back. He looked at Brent, then at Daniel. "It's just so fascinating, because the Riverside Adult Protective Services, well, they've taken a very keen interest lately in cases where a caregiver, particularly one with a financial motive, uses unsupervised medication and faked medical records to simulate dementia in order to seize assets." He smiled, a cold, thin smile. "And they've already heard all about this one." Jonas's call to Adult Protective Services forced their hand. A few weeks later, I was no longer in a sleek glass office, but in a sterile, beige county courtroom for an emergency hearing. It wasn't a full trial, but a hearing to determine if I was, in fact, an at-risk elder. Jonas was beside me, his messy files stacked neatly on the table. Madison and Daniel sat at the opposite table, a few feet and a universe away. Olivia Marsh from the bank was present, as was a stony-faced woman named Ms. Karras, the representative from Riverside Adult Protective Services. Madison, to her credit, was a performer. She wore a modest, high-necked navy blue dress. Her hair was pulled back in a simple bun. She looked like a grieving, exhausted caregiver, her eyes red-rimmed but brave. When the judge asked for her side, she stood and spoke in a soft, trembling voice. She was just a daughter. She only wanted what was best for her mother-in-law. She claimed she was terrified of my lapses in memory. The notes, the photos, the medication log. "Those weren't accusations, Your Honor," she whispered, dabbing a non-existent tear. "They were just tracking, so I could accurately tell the doctors what was happening." Then it was Jonas's turn. He stood, and the sleepy, bureaucratic room snapped to attention. He was no longer the messy, rumpled man from the bakery office. He was a shark. "Your Honor," he said, his voice filling the room. "We won't be talking about feelings today. We'll be talking about facts." One by one, he laid them out. Fact 1. The certified medical report from Dr. Aris, confirming my superior cognitive function. Fact 2. The bank records, showing the frozen loan application and the attempt to use my assets as collateral. Fact 3. An email recovered from Brent Lawson's server, sent from Madison's account 2 days before the meeting. He read it aloud. "Brent, just get the POA ready to sign. We need to transfer full financial control before she gets worse and the bank gets suspicious." Daniel, sitting next to Madison, flinched. He had not seen that email. "But Mrs. Graves Cole claims she was acting out of love." Jonas continued. "Let's see what that love looks like." He set up a laptop and a projector. "This, Your Honor, is a video taken from a security camera in my client's kitchen, dated November 16th. He pressed play. The courtroom was silent, save for the hum of the projector. We all watched. We saw me, carrying the plates. We heard Madison's voice, sharp and cold. And then we saw her, snatching the china, the violent throw, the explosion of porcelain. And then her voice, amplified by the courtroom speakers, shrill and echoing off the wood-paneled walls. "Your stuff ruins my house. Either it goes, or you do." It was devastating. The woman in the modest blue dress on the screen was a stranger to the one sitting at the table. I was stressed. Madison burst out, her voice no longer soft. She was antagonizing me. "That video is edited. It's cut." "Is it?" Jonas said mildly. He clicked the mouse. "Then let's play the rest." The video continued. A few minutes earlier, before I had even brought the plates down. Madison was on the phone, her back to the camera, whispering. "They're just sitting in a box. Tiff. It's dead money. It's just a pile of ugly old plates. If she'd just sell them, we could at least pay off one of the credit cards." Daniel's head sank into his hands. Next, Olivia Marsh was called. She was calm, professional, and precise. She laid out the forgery on the power of attorney, showing the signature samples side by side. She pointed out the fabricated neurologist's name on the medical report Madison had submitted. She confirmed, as a banking professional, that the pattern of activity was consistent with a high-level, premeditated asset-stripping scheme. Then, the judge called for Daniel Graves. My son walked to the stand, looking like a ghost. He looked at me, his eyes begging for I don't know what. Forgiveness, an escape. He admitted, under Jonas's gentle but firm questioning, that yes, he knew Madison was collecting evidence of my forgetfulness. But I swear, I thought it was just because Mom was being stubborn, he said, his voice cracking. I thought we just needed to show her it was time, to convince her to go to a good facility, a safe place. "Did you know about the loan application, Mr. Graves?" Jonas asked. "No, never." "Did you know about the forged power of attorney?" "No, I swear to God. I thought we were just having a conversation with Mr. Lawson about options." "One last question," Jonas said. "In the last few weeks, did you ever overhear your wife discussing your home's finances?" Daniel hesitated. She was on the phone. With the bank, I think. She was angry they were stalling. She said, if they wouldn't let us refinance, she'd just refinance the house in her name only. He stopped, and I watched the final, terrible realization dawn on his face. He looked at Madison, truly seeing her for the first time. She wasn't just cutting my mother out, he whispered, as if to himself. She was cutting me out, too. That was when Ms. Karras, the APS representative, stood up. Your Honor, she said, her voice like steel. Riverside Adult Protective Services formally requests an immediate emergency protective order, barring Madison Cole Graves from any contact with the victim, Eleanor Graves. She wasn't done. Furthermore, we will be recommending the District Attorney's Office open a criminal investigation into Mrs. Graves Cole on charges of forgery, financial fraud, and felony elder abuse. That was the word that did it. Criminal. Madison, the perfect, poised influencer, snapped. The mask didn't just crack, it exploded. She shot to her feet, knocking her chair over. You can't, she shrieked, her face a mask of pure, ugly rage, pointing a trembling finger at me. She did this. She planned it. This is all her fault. It's all because she just wouldn't disappear. The courtroom was silent. She had just confessed to everything. Her outburst sealed it. The judge was swift. An emergency protective order was issued immediately, barring Madison from coming within 500 feet of me or the house. A formal criminal investigation was ordered. The judge looked at my son, his expression not unkind, and said, Mr. Graves, I highly recommend you find a separate residence for a time. 2. Re-evaluate your situation. Daniel just nodded, hollow-eyed. As we left the courthouse, Jonas put a hand on my arm. One last thing, Eleanor, he said. We sat on a bench in the sterile hallway. The final piece. He explained that weeks ago, right after our first meeting. He'd had an idea. He'd had me instruct Olivia at the bank to do something creative. My savings, the money I had moved to the new, safe credit union, hadn't just sat there. When the bank officially froze Daniel and Madison's fraudulent loan application, it also triggered a review of their existing mortgage, which was now in default because of their maxed-out credit. The bank, seeing a high-risk, fraud-entangled loan, was eager to get it off their books. They bundled it as bad debt and sold it at a deep discount. And I, through a limited liability company Jonas set up for me in one afternoon, was the one who bought it. You... What? I asked, my voice low. You're the bank now. Eleanor, Jonas said with a thin smile. You didn't spend your savings. You invested them. You are the silent partner, the primary creditor. You own the debt on your son's house. He explained that if Madison, or even Daniel, made one wrong move, I had the full legal right to foreclose. It was clean. It was legal. It was brutal. Daniel, who had been standing a few feet away, overheard. The last bit of colour drained from his face. The house, he whispered. The house I'm paying for. It's yours. Mum. I stood up, my joints aching, but my back straight. No, Daniel, I said, my voice cold but fair. The house is yours. The debt is mine. I am not taking your home from you. I am simply ensuring that she can never again use you to try and take mine from me. The final confrontation happened that evening. Madison was given a 2-hour window, with a police escort, to retrieve her essential personal belongings before the 24-hour eviction took effect. I was standing in the foyer when she arrived, flanked by two bored-looking patrol officers. Her face was a ruin of smeared makeup and pure, unadulterated hatred. She was pulling a large, white designer suitcase. "I hope you're happy," she spat, her voice a venomous hiss. "You petty, vengeful old woman." I just looked at her, standing in the doorway of the house she had tried to steal, holding the legal order that barred her from it. "You call protecting my own home from a forger revenge?" I asked, my voice calm. "Well, you can call it whatever you need to. Whatever helps you sleep better in your new rental apartment." She lunged, a short, aborted movement, but the officers stepped forward. "Ma'am," one of them said, "just get your things." As she turned to go upstairs, I said her name. "Madison." She stopped, her back rigid. "You forgot one thing," I said. I held out a simple, manila envelope. She snatched it from my hand, expecting, I don't know, what more legal papers. She tore it open. Inside, I had printed two things. First, copies of the emails she had sent to the furniture brand she was courting, the ones where she boasted, "My perfect house will be the ideal backdrop, and I have full control over the aesthetic." Second, I had printed a simple spreadsheet. Jonas's forensic accountant had put it together in an hour. It was a list of all her known brand collaborations from the past year, next to a column showing the average income for those posts, and a final, large, red number at the bottom. The number that represented her completely undeclared income. She looked at the papers, her eyes widening in a new, more primal terror. She understood. This wasn't about the house anymore. "If you ever contact me, or my son, again," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "if you try to fight this in civil court, or if one single negative post about me or this family appears on your brand, this envelope goes straight to the Internal Revenue Service and the DA's Criminal Fraud Division." She stared at me, defeated, not by law, not by justice, but by simple, cold-blooded leverage. She dropped the papers. She didn't go upstairs. She turned, grabbed the handle of her suitcase, and walked out the front door without another word. Her stage finally, completely, empty. The officer just shrugged and followed her out. That night, Daniel sat at the kitchen table, a broken man in a house that was no longer his. He apologized. He cried. He asked how I could ever forgive him. I didn't give him a movie of the week hug. I didn't cry with him. The time for that was long gone. I just went to the cabinet, the one I was now free to use. I took out 2 new, cheap, white mugs I had bought at the grocery store. I boiled the kettle and made us both a cup of tea. I set one down in front of him. "Home isn't walls, Daniel," I said, sitting opposite him. "It isn't an aesthetic or a brand. Home is supposed to be the one place in the world where people don't forge each other's signatures." He just nodded and drank his tea. Out on the porch, the stainless steel trash can, the one she'd thrown my mother's life into, was empty. And on the wall in my room, on a piece of dark velvet, I had already begun to piece the shards together, not to make them whole again. You can never do that, but to make them into something new, a mosaic, something sharp and intricate and beautiful and all my own. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from, so please drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, like this video, and hit that hype button so more people can hear this story.